Warning. This version of this video contains strong language and scary emergency alarms being used as bleeps. For the clean version, click the first link in the description below, and for the explicit version, click the second link in the description below. With all that said, let's get the show on the road.
Where do I begin? This is no doubt going on into the present day. That, to be exact, is what has to be called autistophobia, a form of ableism that is specifically dedicated and designed to discriminate against autistic people. This whole discrimination campaign has emerged since around 1920, which a lot of the United States have been passing laws mandating anyone with autism into getting vasectomized or ligated. Think about how abusive and horrible the treatments were towards autistic people back in the day, as far back as the early 20th century, putting them in institutions due to the condition. This tradition was much rather sadistic and was nothing more than a huge discrimination campaign putting autistic children in those institutions, which were basically concentration camps, as these afflicted kids have been institutionalized as recommended by doctors. This historic fact much resembles those times in the mid-19th century when black people were being used as personal slaves in the Confederate States, those times prior to 1920 when women were treated like second-class citizens not having the right to vote, and most recently prior to the summer of 2015 when gay marriage was legalized, creating great news for the LGBT community after then. Bullshit! Just because we don't like autistic people doesn't mean we don't like black people, women, or gays. That's bullshit! Well, sure, this is relevant. Racism, misogyny, and homophobia are relevant to this topic. I previously pointed out those historical facts that you can find either online or in a history textbook. Along with ableism and autistophobia, these three aforementioned descriptions all fit under the category discrimination, putting it out there. People on the anti-autism bandwagon, which of who identify as so-called normal people, have been fearing that people with autism are going to spread their disability, which is utterly impossible. This whole thing is a myth. Dating as far back as the roaring 1920s, people have been making up a myth that autism is a contagious disease that'll impact your social skills. People often made up a myth that autistics aren't empathetic due to social impairments from the diagnosis on the inflicted, as well as autism being a mental illness. We have people that even think that there is a cure for autism. This is definitely something that can be compared to the flat earth myth, meaning those who have the mentality about autism are dead wrong. Autism actually turns out to be a spectrum, and the symptoms, personality, and character vary from case to case, making each one from another unique. When I heard about the common stereotypes about autism, I'm like, what the actual fuck is this godawful fuckery? Solid examples to be provided. Autistic people are obsessed with something in particular. Wow, we have an obsession? What the fuck do you think that I would be obsessed with since I'm somewhere on the spectrum myself? I expect an answer in the comment section from anyone who believes so. People often make up the stupid bullshit about autism being caused by vaccines, clearly the biggest myth that I've ever come across. Some vaccines are necessary for the sake of a mere human's health, and I think I predictably know what you anti-vaxxers are going to write down in the comment section below. Some of you are going to stubbornly write that vaccines cause autism. I guarantee that some of you are going to say that into the comment section. Well, newsflash, motherfuckers. That myth has been greatly disproven because many people have gotten vaccinated to protect their bodies from certain diseases like measles. These people still remain quote-unquote allistic even after those immunizations. Let me tell you, f***heads, that I was personally born with autism myself, so would you assume that I was born vaccinated because of that f***ing rumor? Newsflash once again, dumbasses. I have gotten vaccinated a number of times in my life upon birth, yet my pinpoint on the spectrum has gotten me nowhere closer to the severe end of the scale, as this whole vaccines cause autism thing was nothing but a fucking hoax. People often made up that autistic people have learning and intellectual disabilities. What the kind of shit is that, by the way? Oh yeah, that's horse shit. I will personally think back in retrospect that my learning abilities have progressed through time throughout my childhood. Then back when I was a high school senior, yes, as Rainey Kleiner, I was the top student in some of my class courses, and boom! I have proof that it's nothing but a stereotype that can also be disproven. This draws the existence of this fact here, proving that autism isn't equal to an intellectual disability because really, number one, it's a spectrum. Some points of the spectrum disprove that as such, and number two, even the severe forms can learn something in other ways possible, whether it's through verbal or nonverbal communication. Even if it's nonverbal communication, it's still learning. People also make up this stupid myth that people on the spectrum can't socialize. Well, actually, yes, the f*** we can. It could depend on the point of the scale. Think about the f***ery made up about autistic people's social skills, especially people rumoring that people on the spectrum cannot socialize at all. I've gone through a shit ton of times in my life that I have broken that stereotype, thus the myth has been disproven among the other aforementioned myths. I dead understand that some people on the spectrum intentionally isolate themselves from even other people on the spectrum, assuming that someone particular is autistic enough to do that, assuming that they have the most severe form, which I feel sad for the inflicted and hope for the best out of the inflicted. People often rumor that autistic people have abnormal facial appearances. Once again, I, as Rainey, have been pinpointed somewhere on the spectrum, and I have on some occasions shown my face, shown how I appear from the outside world. You don't look autistic, so you are not autistic. You're actually allistic. Stop pretending to have autism while you're normal because you're just doing that for attention. Oh, do you really expect that a mere human on the spectrum would facially look like someone with a third copy of the 21st chromosome, in other words, Down syndrome? Let's face the fact, motherfucker, that autism and Down syndrome are two totally distinct conditions that you can actually distinguish in between. I am strongly anticipating that someone on the anti-autism bandwagon writes something related to what that idiot said into the comment section below. If anyone is going to write that, then I expect it. People often mistake that autism can be cured. Well, I previously mentioned in my 28th video that it's a chronic enough condition that it lacks a cure. When someone is born with autism, then expect that the person spends their entire life on the spectrum. Let me point out that a developmental disability isn't resolvable. Autism, for example, as well as others in general. Also, about the fact that autistic people are obsessed with particular interests. Well, people typically think that the inflicted have those obsessed interests for a lifetime. I, as Rainey, once again, have been diversifying my interests up some. I distinguish my interests and expanded my horizons while I'm on the spectrum, so you might think that I'm so unique compared to the others on the spectrum. A positive stereotype happens to be that people often perceive those on the spectrum as geniuses in some cases. Well, if that's one thing, there were some cases in history like Einstein, who had autism himself, as he said his first word at 3 years old, was glued to his interests, socially isolated himself and whatnot. Perhaps it was Einstein's own form. I, as Rainey Kleiner, once again, am nowhere near Einstein on the intelligence quotient. I'm no rocket scientist, I'm just some average ordinary guy, or slightly above or below, depending on the area or circumstance. On the contrary, those cancerous dumbfucks on the anti-autism bandwagon also think that autistic people are stupid just simply for quote-unquote not being normal. Autism may affect brain factors, but once again, it's not actually an intellectual disability because it's a motherfucking spectrum. I clearly see why a bunch of asinine shitbags are on the anti-autism bandwagon. The reason pretty much supports their jealousy that they aren't so special in any way possible. As I speak as Rainey, yeah, real-life counterpart, I recall from retrospect when I was being put into special education with those peers that aren't actually autistic but genuinely have learning disabilities and intellectual disabilities. This, however, was unfair due to the classroom rules making me follow along their needs instead of my own. Those special ed teachers back then were putting special needs of those with intellectual disability far before my personal needs. It felt much like that they were believing that the stereotype was true regardless of disability. The curriculum back in the old days were making me look and seem like such a slow learner, just being pressured to follow the needs of these intellectually disabled peers. Yeah, that part from the past over 10 years has really pissed me off. Not gonna lie, I honestly hated how the school curriculum operated in special education back then from where I was at during that time. If you are on the spectrum and had such a similar experience, then feel free to address that into the comment section below, so that way that I know who I'm even with. Also, look at the bullshit that they have on Intellectual Disabilities Wikipedia page. You can actually see that they even put autism under the category of an intellectual disability, unaware that autism is a spectrum. What the actual f*** is this bullshit? That's not a fact. That's just some stupid dumb fuckery that was obviously made by some so-called holistic, arrogant cretin with an incomprehensive mind who basically claims to know everything. This is plain preposterous. Here's the part that really pisses me off, and that's the subminimum wage part, which I clearly see that as a sign of injustice. It's not only the autistic people who are being prone to subminimum wage, but anyone with a disability as well. Some states are basically looking down on the disabled as inferiors by paying them below the wage floor. How much further out of their fucking minds could they be? Just fucking tell me if those fuckheads are trying to impoverish those so-called inferior workers. I seriously don't understand why it has to be so fucking necessary to be such a cheapskate toward an employee with any disability. I mean, what's the fucking purpose? Spit out the fucking purpose! Let's take a look at the article on the U.S. Department of Labor webpage. It says here, and I quote, "The Fair Labor Standards Act provides for the employment of certain individuals at wage rates below the statutory minimum. Such individuals include student learners, vocational education students, as well as full-time students employed in retail or service establishments, agriculture, or institutions of higher education. Also included are individuals whose earnings or productive capacities are impaired by a physical or mental disability, including those related to age or injury, for the work to be performed. Employment at less than minimum wage is authorized to prevent curtailment of opportunities for employment. Such employment is permitted only under certificates issued by the Wage and Hour Division. Employment of workers with disabilities. Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act authorizes employers, after receiving a certificate from the Wage and Hour Division, to pay special minimum wages, wages less than the federal minimum wage, to workers who have disabilities for their work being performed." What the f*** is this? It f***ing seems like you're trying to put the disabled workers in poverty, you dirty motherfucking excuses of employers. Disability is not a f***ing excuse to go below the f***ing wage floor. Why does sub-minimum wage even exist to begin with? Whoever the fuck had the idea for sub-minimum wage for workers with disabilities, I personally see this as an antichrist. This basically promotes discrimination against disabilities in the workforce because really, this gets me imagining that they are in greater poverty than those being paid actual minimum wage. Some employers are doing this, and I clearly don't understand. I'm aware that some of you are going to go off writing into the comment section to demand that I should get over it because it prevents cutback on employment opportunities. That's being a cheapskate, and no, I would refuse to even work for a miserly cheap dumbass who can't comprehend with equality and fairness. I know you'll tell me, if you have a disability, then you must work for an employer paying you less than minimum wage. No, f*** that. How about I go on a massive crime spree in North Korea? How about living under World War III, assuming it's thermonuclear? How about I get chugging on a whole can of kerosene? How about I work under the 996 war culture in China? How about I get chased by a group of rhinos? How about I eat and swallow tobacco? How about I do a felony at the FBI headquarters and get arrested? This whole list above consists of everything that I'd much rather do than work under some cheap antichrist for less than minimum wage. Not saying that anyone who performs poorly on their job should be allowed to continue. I'm saying that people with any disability should be fully entitled to the right to equal opportunity employment, hoping for the adequacy out of them. Rejecting an employee with disability because of his or her disability is just downright wrong as f***. An employer like that deserves karma and a sour taste of their own medicine. Plus, there are a number of businesses that won't let anyone with autism or any disability work for them. That really rapidly grinds my gears. Just f***ing give me a way apart from injustice that I should interpret this. Ever come across what's called the autism insult? There have been a number of cases of people using autism or autistic just to insult their target. People often say shit like, "You're an autistic dirtbag. Haha, weak," because autism isn't really an insult. How do you even expect me to believe so? Autism is a spectrum that varies form to form. People with autism have different character and different personalities from one another. That's a fact. If you believe that autism is an insult, then holy shit, you are a dumbass, as people who believe so typically believe in those said stereotypes being legit, which once again aren't. Keep in mind that the autism insult is far too weak to even grind my gears a bit. Also, the fact that autism isn't a disease and that autism is yet labeled autism spectrum disorder, on the contrary, unbelievable. Those f***heads need to know that it's not really a disorder. I genuinely looked up the word disorder on the Google Dictionary, and as you can see on the third definition that I highlighted, that label of autism being a so-called disorder just supports the stereotypes about people on the spectrum. Seriously, why the bloody f*** is it called a disorder? Fucking answer me! The label of autism spectrum disorder was obviously made by Autism Speaks, the organization that quote-unquote supports autism that created those stereotypes about autistic people and has done so much damage to their lives. You see, it's those cancerous dumb f***s on the anti-autism bandwagon who are the reason why autistic people feel so f***ishly insecure about themselves and who they are. Also, the puzzle pieces on the autism movement has been seen as controversial because it supposedly indicates that they are puzzling as shit, which shows that those so-called normal people are stupid dumps whose micro-sized brains can't comprehend with actuality. Straight fact, everyone is unique. Whether or not that you are on the spectrum, yes, even so-called allistic people can be unique from one another as well. People on the anti-autism bandwagon like to call themselves normal just because they don't have a disability, just to look down on anyone with any disability, including those with autism, as inferiors. Some like to fucking use them as servants or slaves and refuse to return a favor. Fucking explain to me how the living fuck am I supposed to interpret this in a way apart from downright prejudice? They typically have the criteria for being normal by 1, not having a disability, and 2, looking down on the disabled as if they are the most inferior entities of the whole wide world, ergo, believe in the stereotypes. Don't these f***heads realize that it's not normality but instead hubris? Something I'd strongly anticipate out of children on the playground. Whoever the mastermind of this irrational bunk is, those idiots on the bandwagon would definitely salute that cretin, as I can see. Those idiots believe that autistic people like myself are at the bottom of the barrel. Another thing that fans my flames is the oppression in healthcare. I get that some doctors don't even deserve to be doctors, especially since some of them are for the oppression. Those doctors often give inadequate medical treatment towards anyone with a disability because really, they are idiotic enough to believe in the legitimacy in those aforementioned stereotypes. Like what the actual f*** is wrong with society these days? Doctors who insist on medically mistreating autistic or disabled people are doctors who deserve to be fired and arrested. If I ever come across a doctor who supports that oppression, then I feel the urge to destroy that medical license of that discriminating doctor. I have a full understanding that some oppressive crumb brains have psychological issues that support their oppression. Well, I can't blame you for your psychological issues, especially if that's your insecurity, but let me tell you, it doesn't fucking make it better to be so fucking oppressive towards the people on the spectrum, you fucking dick***s. It's those oppressed assholes like you who are the reason why people with autism are feeling so insecure about themselves. Face the fucking fact for once that it's not a resolvable condition and that you should fucking expect that these people are going to live on the fucking spectrum. God, I strongly hope you're shaking and shivering after being told off, especially if you're part of the oppression campaign, as you strongly deserve that sour taste of your own medicine. Let me tell you that these autism discriminators are something compared to racists, Nazis, so-called entitled Karens, sexists, homophobes, snowflakes, criminals, terrorists, traitors, and ruthless dictators. Those aforementioned types are best described as horrible people, who are the reasons why society is a piece of shit, right along with fanboys and fangirls of toxic fandoms and anti-fans that toxically oppress against fandoms. Throughout what I've been explaining, I'm not saying that autistic people, nor anyone with any other disability in general, should have the absolute freedom to do whatever they want as if they were above the law, which they aren't. In fact, no one is, really. I'm saying that autistic and other disabled people should be treated equal as everyone else. I'm standing for equal treatment in order for us all to be even. Hopefully that I made that crystal clear to everyone in my audience. The puzzle piece symbol shall be abolished and replaced with a rainbow-colored lemniscate. As a result, I have changed the thumbnail for the 28th video of the Master Rainy channel, and it's new and improved compared to the old thumbnail, supported by Autism Speaks' manipulation. Whether you're a male, a female, a member of the LGBT community, a straight person, a single person, a white person, a black person, a Hispanic person, a foreigner from anywhere, or anything else of that sort, especially if you're a so-called normal person described by any of those aforementioned demographics, and you insist on looking down on autistic or disabled people as if they are the most inferior entities, insist that they should be paid subminimum wage just simply for their disability, insist on exploiting their insecurities, insist that they get institutionalized into forced sterilizations, insist on having medically mistreated as inequality to so-called holistics, or any other form of biased treatments towards them, then I don't want your support nor your salute. So expect that I roast and totally diss the blue blazes out of you, because really, you are an absolute disgrace! You are an absolute disgrace to this earth, and even God is acceptably ashamed of you and your petty existence! You absolutely disgust me! I hope you bigoted dumb f***s are f***ing happy that you are the reason behind their insecurities! My apologies if anyone who is willingly supportive to the autistic people and disabled people to oppose the oppression has been left shaking from my loss of cool. It's just that these oppressive douchebags really make my skin crawl with their biased bull. If you see anyone being so biased towards autistic or disabled people, my advice is, whether you're an autistic person, a so-called allistic person, a person with Down syndrome, an intellectually disabled person, or even a so-called normal person, that you oppose these people. Hopefully this leads to the justice that's deserved with all that said. Bringing this rant here to a conclusion, this is my whole take on the oppressive campaign that's been going on for a while. I'm here supporting the autism rights movement, and I am totally opposing these oppressive assholes who deserve to be registered on a publicly accessible online registry for life. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit subscribe, ring the bell, and prepare for the 76th video on the Master Rainy channel coming sooner or later. Until then, I will see you next time. Have a good one.